That is the state ballot of Maine.
But are they even allowed to teach anything in school now? Because they're taking away everything from everybody. They're not allowed to do diversity, they're not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that.
I don't think they care a whole lot about that in Maine, to be honest with you. But no,
Yeah, well, we'll probably get the money taken away then.
Maine is a very, they consider Maine to be the state that if you're going to retire, that's the state to retire.
I've been there, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's quiet. And
It's quiet, it's gorgeous.
But as I said, Chamberlain became quite, after the war, became quite a, he became part of, he was the face of Maine. But the point I wanted to make to you is that here is a biblical scholar who studied the whole thing and saw that, a little piece here and a little piece there and a little piece there doesn't justify something that's wrong. Okay? Now, how many others felt the way he did? Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
a lot of Christians didn't.
Yeah, well, our Southern church split from us over that issue.
You mean the Presbyterian Church?
Yes,
Yeah, during the Civil War.
during the Civil War. They didn't reunite with us until 1984.
1984?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't the Civil War not only to preserve the freedom of the South, but it was a big economic issue.
That's the way the war started.
Well, because slavery, they didn't have anybody to work if they didn't have slaves.
See, that's the way the war started. But as I told you, once the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, everything changed. The South realized that there was no way they were going to compromise with the North and reunite and have slavery intact. They knew the only way they could have slavery intact was to win the war. And as a result, remember, before this, prisoners of war, where they basically just captured them, and after they signed some sort of agreement that they weren't going to fight for 12 months, they sent them home. Okay? After the Emancipation Proclamation, that's when prison camps were opened up. Andersonville was one of the worst.
Well, that was the worst ones. They were all dying.
Well, that's because the revisionist historians from the North don't want you to know about Fort Douglas. Fort Douglas was in Chicago. And according to historians, the concept of waterboarding was invented at Fort Douglas. There's no remnants of it left today. But there were, so the Union was just as nasty to the Confederates as the Confederates were to Union prisoners.
Again, though, war is war.
Yeah, and that's one of the funny things Sherman said, is war is hell.
Yeah, war is war. I mean, I'm not saying they do anything right, but I'm just saying, if you want to win, you got to win. If you don't want to win, well then,
But the point I'm trying to make here is this is a biblical scholar who studied this whole thing and came to that conclusion. I mean, it's, he didn't point to specific texts that say that this says this and this says that and this says that. He said, this is wrong, and here's why it's wrong. Go ahead.
Why? I know why they pointed that to slavery, but why did it impact the Indians?
That's another issue. But because I've always asked the same thing, and remember for years I lived on a street called Ewing Avenue. That was from the Ewing family, who paid apparently the indigenous Americans who lived there for the land. And so the argument was, we paid for it. Yeah, what did you pay? Remember, they paid indigenous Americans $24 for all of Manhattan Island.
It was still an economic issue.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure there was, and there was also the fact that they were living on land that somebody else wanted. And,
That's why most of them got killed, because they wanted their land.
yeah, exactly,
They didn't care about them, they cared about the,
yeah, it's, you know, there's a classic scene in the John Wayne Civil War movie where a battle takes place after the Civil War is over. And, you know, after the battle is, you know, it's just about done, this rider comes up and says, "The war is over, the war is over." And they turned to the Confederates and said, you knew the war was over, didn't you? "Yeah." "Well, what'd you fight us for?" And his answer was, "This is our land and you want it."
right, that's all.
But I just wanted you to see that there were some people that went past the old justification arguments that everybody used. And I mean, they all used it. You know, it was considered in some circles that they were doing God's will and doing them a favor by bringing them here. They were doing them a favor, after all. They were living in huts and trees over there. At least now they get to live inside a cabin. And they believed that. They honestly believed that. There was actually preachers preaching that. But fortunately for us, there were people like, you know, the abolitionists and people like Chamberlain who really were committed to making this go away.